Are you ready?
Oh,
Okay. Right. Okay then. So, shall we go? Right. Okay.
oh.
And welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna, and what's your name? Teddy. Okay. And together we are welcoming our wonderful guest who is Jessica Hyams. I hope I've said your name correctly.
You have, yeah, you have. Well done.
um, who is here. Now, you might be surprised as you see Jessica that she's not here to talk about cats, but she is here to talk about bulldog breeds. And so, welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's really nice.
It's I'm just wondering whether Daddy has anything else he wants to say. Is there anything else you want to say? Yes? Okay. Okay. Teddy is saying that he is indeed very happy to hear you talk about bulldogs because he feels like they get a bit of a bad rap. So,
Yeah, they can indeed. They do. Where would you like to start? What would you like
well,
me to start with?
I think maybe it might be good for you to tell us about your experience with bulldogs. And I understand you have an American.
I have an American bully. Yes, an
Yes.
exact American bully who's currently in my bed, but my bed's too messy to show on camera right now. But yes, I do. I have an exempted American bully. And I also am fostering a miniature dachshund, and they're very good friends. And then this is Stringer Bell, who just needs to get involved all the time. And he's a cat, so we're not here to talk about him. But yeah, so my experience. Whew, so when I was a kid, my mum worked at Battersea, and we always had rescue dogs. The first dog she had used to sleep under my cot and was a Battersea kind of mongrel type. And then after that, after she died, when I was about 3, we actually got a King Charles Cavalier who was very bitey. And she lived about 10 years. She was an ex-puppy farm dog and then had been homed to quite a not a very nice home. And she bit everyone except for me. So that was interesting. And then after that, we had a few rescue dogs, and we had a Staffy cross called Billy, who was also from Battersea. I've always been very interested in animals. They've always been my special interest. At 8 years old, I used to go into vets and watch operations and clean their floors and all sorts of things, which is bizarre for an 8-year-old, but there you go. And at 18, I went and did an animal science diploma. I didn't do that well at school. My mum sort of forced me onto this course. And at the same time, just before then, from the age of 17 to 19, I was actually in an abusive relationship with a slightly older guy who had two Staffies, well, one Staffy and one Staffy cross puppy that about 6 months before we broke up, he was given this puppy, and the puppy was sort of being passed around a few different people. Um, and after a series of unfortunate events and on the last day where this dog was sort of brutalized in front of me, I left with the dog. So from there, I had this dog and he got quite ill actually. So we were in and out of the RSPCA getting treatment. And my mum and I were asking about rehoming, and they said this was 2008, I think, 2009, 2008. And they said, well, you can't really rehome staffies because there's too many. There's one being killed every hour. And so then I was like, mind blown, because this dog, he was Staffy, Rottweiler, and American Bulldog. And his name was Bubba. And he was literally the softest dog I had ever met. He was about 7 months at this point, but he was just a delight. So we had him. He eventually managed to get into Dogs Trust. We had him for a few months, and he just grew into such a lovely, gentle dog. And then after that, I got a bit of a bee in my bonnet. I was about 18 at the time. I'm 34 now, and I set out to just rescue every bull breed, and to my mother's dismay, bring home every bull breed that needed a spot that basically came into my vicinity. Even to go as far as to going on Gumtree one Christmas and messaging a whole bunch of breeders and just saying, when you can't sell your dogs, you know, keep my information. Ended up with 3 puppies, which also managed to get into Dogs Trust at the time. But yeah, just dog after dog, abuse cases. I then moved out at 20 and it just carried on. I just kept taking in dogs, and there was just a flow of them, an ongoing flow. I mean, people were swapping them for phones on Gumtree. They were giving them away free, dumping them out and about. I had whole litters of puppies dumped on me. Like some of the most horrific abuse cases you could ever think of that just couldn't get spaces that I'd take. I started volunteering for a charity and doing pound pulling as well. So going to the pounds and taking dogs and getting them into rescue spaces and foster. And I did that for many years, whilst also fostering multiple dogs at a time, some of which I took and they didn't have what we call rescue backup because I couldn't get them into rescues, so I would privately rehome. But mainly they would be rehomed through rescues. But it was crazy, and it still is crazy. It's still the same thing. I just don't have capacity to take in, literally the space to take in dogs anymore because I'm living in a much smaller rented property. So but yeah, so that's kind of where it started. I ran a little dog walking business from the age of 19, 20, after I graduated college, and I had that on and off for 10 years. I sometimes would be kind of fed up and try and go and work in the city and do some temping and things, and I'd do that for a few months and then I'd end up back with dogs. And in 2016 I basically got really fed up with trying to make ends meet, trying to survive in office life on and off. So I ended up actually going back to school at 26, and I did an access to biomedicine degree, access to biomedicine course, like a diploma course, because I originally had planned that I would go back and do veterinary medicine. However, I very quickly realized that actually I hate touching anything dead. Like, even if there's a dead spider on the floor, I can't pick that. I can't pick the spider up. Like, I've got a really bad phobia of kind of dead animals. I mean, dead animals are not nice to pick up anyway, but you know, if you're a vet, you've got to deal with all of that, right? And the year before, I think in 2014, 2015, I'd started shadowing the behaviourist from New Hope Animal Rescue, which is a non-destruct rescue run by a fantastic guy called Niall Lester, who there's some great information on, but he is a big bull breed advocate, so and rescuer. And yeah, I started shadowing his behaviourist then, and we're still very close friends. She was my mentor for many years. I literally stayed with her this weekend. We went to the Animal Behaviour Kent conference, which was amazing. So yeah, and then I did my access course, realised maybe I didn't want to do veterinary medicine, but I found the role of clinical animal behaviourist and I was like, that's what I want to do. But all the courses that kind of you get that qualification through were out of London, and I couldn't leave London really. So I ended up going to Roehampton University, enrolled in biological sciences. So I picked modules between zoology and biomedicine to create a course in clinical behavioral medicine, but it probably was a bit more in depth in terms of the biomedicine. So I did everything from ethology to evolutionary biology, animal behavior, but also like neuroscience, molecular biology, immunology, all sorts of things like that. So thank you. Thank you to my cat because he's just looking at me lovingly. So yeah, that's basically education. And then after that, I started practicing as a behaviorist after I graduated in 2020, with kind of supervision from Brett Donner, who worked at New Hope, and joined the International Canine Behaviorists, their accreditation in, I think, 2022. So yeah, mainly I was working in rescue then, supporting a few different rescues online during lockdown and things. But I'd been doing kind of working behavior cases for years with rescues in terms of going in and taking out dogs that no one else could handle, and helping out volunteering. So yeah, it's quite a lot of experience. And in January 2020, my Staffy Cross died, who I'd had for 10 years. And I was absolutely distraught. And I couldn't cope very well without her, because it's also the routine of losing a dog as well. It was just the whole thing. It was honestly the worst. I mean, I've been through a lot, but that was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me. So I got on to a few different people, Donna and Niall. But I was like, I want to take a foster dog to get me back into kind of just normality, because it was so bizarre for me not to have a dog. Um, Long story short, I ended up with the pig, who is hilarious. And she was a big, grabbing, guarding weirdo, that I went to sit at kennels. She had no engagement whatsoever, like literally didn't want to know about humans, just constantly grabbing. Her body was a complete mess. She actually, the first time I met her, all she did was grab and rip up grass over and over repeatedly. She didn't even look at me. There was a big sign on her kennel saying, "Do not enter, this dog guards," and I was like, great. But yeah, so I didn't enter. They let her out and into the paddock, and we just kind of hung out, although she ignored me. I think at the end she sort of she kind of came quite close to me and sort of leant her bum at me, and I was like, on me, and I was like, okay, there's some kind of connection there. And then I wasn't actually sure about taking her home at first, because I was just a bit overwhelmed and just like, well, not really sure. And I was on the phone to my mum afterwards, and I told her all about her. And I was like, well, I'm not sure, and umming and ahhing and going, because no dog was going to fill the void of Lulu, who was my fantastic Staffy Cross. And my mum just said to me, well, if you don't take her, who will? And I went, yeah, no one's going to take that dog. So I took her to foster and rehabilitate.
It seems to me, listening to your story, that dogs found you, and particularly bull breeds found you.
Yeah, it wasn't on purpose.
And I think that the very fact that this happened during a very traumatic period for you, kind of cemented that empathy that you had.
You could say I'm trauma bonded to bull.
Exactly. I would say that is very clear to me, that is what's happened, which is wonderful, because what it means is that you have found your calling, and so here you are talking about this breed, or these breeds. So maybe it might be good to get a sense of what bull breeds originally were for.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I think before we talk about that, I just want to say I think there's a lot of misinformation about bull breeds out there, even in the sort of positive reinforcement side of the fence. My cat's going to jump around the room now. Side of the fence, in terms of what bull breeds need and what bull breeds were bred for, and them being working breeds and us meeting that need and all the rest of it. So originally there's different types of bull breeds. You've got the mastiffs, you've got the bulldogs, who were sort of known as butcher dogs and used for certain herding behaviors, but I'd say it was a bit more aggressive than herding really large cattle and things. And that's sort of a whole nother conversation. But if we get to bull terriers, jump ahead a little bit to bull terriers, they were bred originally for bull baiting, the sport of bull baiting. So it was a bulldog crossed with, I think it was the English bulldog crossed with the English terrier. I think that's what they were called, which are now two extinct breeds. But basically they formed the Staffordshire Bull Terrier and the Pit Bull Terrier. And these were sporting breeds, as in, blood sports, dog fighting. And the dogs were basically pitted against, to start with, different animals and things, so I'm missing out a little bit, otherwise we'll be here all night. But bull baiting was the main sport, which was the dogs would be placed in a pit with a bull who often had pepper up their nose, and the dogs would have to fight for their lives. Now, the aim wasn't always to kill one or another. It might be that the dog would just have to subdue the bull. So that would happen. Going to put a trigger warning in here because it's quite grim. That would happen by the dog jumping and latching onto the bull's face and staying on. And eventually the bull would subdue. So that's originally what they were bred for. So that's, fast forward now, sometimes we get a lot of these jumping and grabbing behaviors, although it's not necessarily from that, but they have a very traumatic history, and we can think about that in terms of their epigenetics and genetic history for sure. However, if you look at like the history of bull breeds now, actually it was quite a short-lived time, because although in different parts, well, in the UK, in different parts of the world, dog sports still happen, blood sports still happen, dog fighting still happens, pitting them against other animals still happens. But in the UK, it's very few and far between, and those bloodlines are very, very watered down. But what we can think about, and what I like to talk about a lot, is rather than biting being a genetic need, I mean, technically biting is a genetic need for all dogs, but a genetic need that needs to be fulfilled, or this fighting background needs to be fulfilled, because after it moved on from bull baiting and they made that illegal, they then started on dog fighting, so pitting the dogs against each other, hence the pit bull. But in terms of the bull breeds we see today, you might have the odd line, probably a very tiny percentage of lines that are real dog fighting lines and dog fighting pit bulls, and you've got to go quite far underground usually to get those lines. However, the general bull breeds that we see today are very watered down and have many different breeds in them. So does that answer your question about history?
It does, and I think it's really important because it's the context in which this breed evolves, or these breeds evolve, and it seems to me that the world is excuse me, divided between people like you who are tremendous advocates for the breeds, and then the rest of the world, which regards them with great suspicion and, I dare say, fear. And so it's how to navigate the two. And you're dealing with dogs that are extremely powerful. So when things go wrong, it's more serious than if they go wrong with, a Cocker Spaniel, or, even maybe a Goldie. So how do we navigate this to understand perhaps how to help these dogs so that they're not, maybe the question I should be asking is there a sensitivity to these breeds that we as the general public are not aware of? And I am thinking about the epigenetics here. I know you've said that it's very, very watered down, that these lines are not so prominent anymore. But there's something here, I think, that we need to understand.
So I think to start with, in terms of the split, right, there's more than one split. We have the people like myself that will tell you a bull breed is just a dog, sensitive, and actually a lot of them far more bomb proof than, say, a border collie. They're just a dog. When they get stressed, they get a bit mouthy. So does and when I say mouthy, I mean like try and grab hold of clothes, or need to chew things, or get destructive, not like want to kill people. But so does, I see that a lot also in miniature Daxies, like I've got one downstairs. I see that a lot with working line retrievers and Labradors. They're quite mouth orientated. Anyway, we've got that side of the fence, right? That's my side. Andrew Hale's side, that kind of side, Donna's side. Then you have the positive reinforcement side of the fence where they're really into bull breeds, but they say they're bred for fighting, and they need to bite every day, and you need to play tug 10 times a day, you need to hang them off spring poles, and they need to meet that need. You need to get as close to the dog fighting history as you can because they can't do it. So you need to meet that need in that way. And then you have the complete other side of the fence, which is these dogs, are devil dogs. They're monsters. So it's split three ways. In terms of the epigenetics, really interestingly, epigenetics is such a interesting thing because yes, there is premise for it, and yes, genes can be shaped through, or rather, they can be switched on through things like trauma and even foods we eat, different things like that. But Daniel Shaw did a great speech on the weekend at the conference about genetics, and he was talking about how actually, often we have a blank slate when it comes to a puppy, or basically a puppy even in utero. However, if the mother is going through stress, then we get up to cortisol levels and things like that. But in terms of epigenetics and heritability, it's a very complex subject in terms of what comes through. Now, what do we need to know about bull breeds and how to keep them safe? Well, the one thing I'll tell you is that I am 5'1" and 7 stone. And when I say I am more scared of border collies, I'm scared of border collies after all my experience in rescue than I am a bull breed. Send me in to a 60 kg bull breed any day. Border collie, no thanks, not for me. Bull breeds are often misunderstood, but the reason also why I fell in love with them so madly was because a lot of the time they're far more bomb proof than other breeds, actually. And you've got to go quite wrong. I mean, I used to say, with a Staffy or a Pit Bull, because if we go back to the breeding of the Staffy and the Pit Bull, if they showed any aggression towards humans, they had to be able to be handled in the ring by humans mid-fight, right? So if they showed any aggression towards humans, they were shot in the head. They weren't bred from. Sorry, because I should have put a trigger there, but that's what used to happen. They then started breeding American Staffies and American Bulldogs and things like that. Dogs with slightly more guardian tendencies, so they would again be bomb-proof, like any guardian dog. With I shouldn't say bomb-proof because actually no dog is bomb-proof. Any dog can bite, but for the sake of the conversation, that's the term I'm going to use. We use it in rescue sometimes. But yeah, in terms of their breeding, there are some dogs that have a guardian background as well as the bull terrier, as well as the bulldog, or more of the bulldog side, which has more guardian breed in them. And those dogs are as well can be very bomb proof, but can be more prone to having people directed aggression, purely because if they're meant to guard, they're watchdogs, and they're not meant to like intruders necessarily or welcome all intruders. And there are many different breeds that can fall into that category as well. But in terms of the Staffy crosses, pit types, I mean, it's very rare. I think out of hundreds of dogs, I've met three. I've had three that were in my care, kind of Staffy crosses types, that actually showed aggression towards humans. But I've met a hell of a lot of dogs that haven't. And with the American Bullies, I think where the complexities came back in was they were trying to lessen the kind of gameness and make a slower breed apparently and use them for show. But again, they bred more of that guardian breed back in. So this is the thing that's been really complex, I think, is because they are very sensitive, because not only are they sort of guardian breeds to a certain extent, they also are all bred with this really awful conformation where most of them have hip dysplasia, luxating patellas, luxating elbows. I mean, my dog's having her shoulders ultrasounded to investigate what's going on with her, because her shoulders, I mean, she was bred to be sort of bowed, and that's caused so many complexities. So, you know, and we all know that pain causes behavioral issues in dogs. It's a leading cause in aggression and separation anxiety and all these things. So that there's a lot of complexities with them. And then on top of that, what you have is this sort of flood of these social media trainers all over TikTok, Instagram. Basically, all of those pages have all had American bullies at some point that they're training on their videos with a prong collar on. So
that brings me to what what was running through my mind, which is that there does seem to still be this idea that the bigger and the more dangerous the dog, the tougher you have to be with them. And it would seem that listening to you talk about the breed or the breeds, that actually that is the worst thing that we could be doing, because we are actually acting in a very provocative way towards very sensitive dogs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even provocative, it's just aggressive.
Like,
and most of these dogs are already in pain. But something else that I haven't mentioned, and across the board can be true for all bull breeds, and it's one of those things a bit like herding in border collies that you're never going to get out. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but they have a very short threshold for stress. And this is where people go, oh, you know, they're dangerous or they're quick to fight with other dogs, this, that, and the other. They've got a really short threshold for stress. They get stressed quickly because that's what they were bred to do. So now this stress can happen if they're cold, if they're in pain, if they ate something that upset their tummy, if they feel cornered. But a lot of them aren't going to react in an aggressive way. I mean, a really common behavior trait I see a lot, especially in bull breeds, but actually I've got a Romy dog that's doing it. I've got a miniature Dachshund that's doing it. I've got a few different breeds. Labrador that's doing it is this jumping and grabbing behavior where they're latching onto clothes, arms. It's like a frantic displacement behavior. And it can often be triggered by two things: discomfort and pain in the body, in combination with overhandling and non-consensual handling from the owners, or the humans or caregivers. And this is something we see quite commonly in bull breeds. And if you think about it, it does make sense, because what was their original, you know, how did they originally have to survive, right? They had to jump and latch on to the bull in order to subdue the bull. And this really gets sold by a lot of people in that category of, we love bull breeds, but they're fighting dogs and you need to treat them as such, but we're going to do it with positive reinforcement. And you need to play tug 10 times a day. This is the thing, is like, they look at that like they love their bull baiting past and their dog fighting past. Do they? Like every single, I've had a few that have been really, a couple that have been with me that have been really purebred bull terrier types. And when it comes down to confrontation, they don't seek it out. It's not something they do. And I think the thing is, they will if you keep them in a high arousal state all the time, because, you know, what's a high arousal state? It's just chronic stress. So if you're constantly playing tug and then they're resting and then you're getting up and you're, you know, doing all these loads of obedience training and this, that, and the other, and keeping their general arousal level up, then any dog is going to attack another dog. But actually dogs are naturally non-confrontational, and it's something like I've just been really reminded of the last couple of days with Piglet and this puppy, right? Because when she first came to me, she's a dog that would be described as a real game dog, like wanted to grab hold of everything and, you know, jump and latch on, guarding at the door, like she's, an American bully, right? She's this kind of, high arousal, just mental, really hard to handle game dog that probably needed to, be hung off a spring pole or whatever they're, these stupid games that they're doing. And in fact, do you know what her problem was?
Pain.
Multiple slip discs in the middle of her back. She had chronic gut inflammation and pancreatitis.
It's,
And she gets cold.
it to me, it is a complete lack of imagination and empathy
Yeah.
to think that these dogs that were bred for this purpose would be enjoying that, instead of understanding that these dogs were actually acting to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Because they were thrown into these situations, and sadly still are in many places, where they have no choice but to defend themselves. And to think that people are attributing that as this is what the dog desires, to have that kind of stress level, is really bizarre, really, really bizarre.
It is. And it's just an example of like what happens if you keep any dog in a stress state. Like Piglet is kept not on purpose anymore. She's just kept in a really low arousal state. She wears a jumper, a fleece in winter, and she does lots of slow sniffing, and she does lots of chewing every day, and she has lots of autonomy, and I don't overhandle her. She always comes to me if she wants touch and things like that, and everything is done slowly and nicely. And she is 35 kilos, like she's a big dog, and I've brought this tiny little miniature dachshund in who literally has no fear, runs the roost, and she comes downstairs and he bites her toes, and she jumps on the sofa, and she plays with it, she gets down on the floor and plays with him, and all of these things. And I'm thinking, and I just leave them to communicate. I have to be there because she's bigger than him and she could hurt him by accident. But in terms of their communication, it's beautiful. And I just think, he's a very full-on puppy, right? He's really full on. And so many dogs would not tolerate him or want to engage with him. And when she doesn't want to engage, you know what she does? She goes upstairs. She takes herself away.
Yeah. And I think this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's so important that we understand this. It's about when you have what clearly is a very physically sensitive dog, or a physically sensitive breed.
Yeah.
What you want to do is allow that dog to feel safe.
Yeah.
And then they're going to feel like they can go, and the likelihood of that dog becoming dangerous, I think, is almost nil at that point. So this is such a beautiful explanation of what is going on with bull breeds. And I hope that everyone who is watching comes away from this with a deeper understanding than they had before, so that when we encounter these stories or a bull breed, that at least we have some understanding of what's going on. So thank you, Jessica.
That's okay.
Now, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
So you can go onto my website. It's littlelargedogs.com. My Instagram is probably the most lively, and that is Little Large Dogs LDN. So that's how you would find me.
Wonderful. I'll be putting a link to both in the description box.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Until next time. Goodbye.
Bye. Take care.